Welcome to the failure series. The goal here is that we're talking about things that didn't go as planned. Not that you should have these preconceived notions of how things should go and everything's gonna have this nice little tight bow on it and be perfect, but in reality, that's kind of how our mind works, right? Our own self-talk. So this is a series dedicated to those sort of things. Just a way for me to kind of be committed to putting something out there. You know, those failed projects, those research articles that don't go well that we talk about or never publish in Java, those sort of things, but in my own medium. So we're gonna take this in 4 parts. The first one's how I came into this. So I was always encouraged by my mentors to attend as many conferences as you possibly could. That's where you get a lot of value, be able to connect with other people, learn skill sets, keep up with the current research, what's going on, what may be published, what's not being published. So it was just something I literally took out extra student loans as much as I could just to drop them in to this sort of fun where I could go or two around. We do all the hacks. I'm telling you, we had sometimes 10 or 12 people staying in a hotel room for 2, just sleeping on the floor. The goal was just get there and we'll figure out how much we can learn. Reflecting on this, I think this kind of fell into my lap for 2 different reasons. First of all, I had an interest that I kind of was pursuing regularly, and that was data collection and these apps that were going on the market and just how good were they, what was available, and putting those into a poster and presentation. I was kind of circulating that around. Someone happened to stumble into this, and that was Janet Twyman. I love her. She's an amazing human being, amazing behavior analyst. If you haven't checked into her work, make sure you do. I'll include some sort of link down below. And she sat in one of those presentations. It was the first time I was ever cited in an article. It was pretty cool, pretty weird. But it was those 2 things coming together, and she found herself in a position where ABAI was working with her to create the second education conference. It was held in 2013. So I think those were the 2 kind of key things that led to me being approached by my supervisor, because she had saw that line of work and she was really interested in getting that highlighted. But I was also known for just throwing extra time at projects, which is how ABAI runs their conferences. It's all volunteer, donation-based time. So there's a whole lot of different organizer roles I can get into. Essentially, I was just there to help support one of the other organizers. Things like crafting emails, providing some feedback, organizing things in Excel, reviewing for the appropriateness on the topic as well as the ethical quality, I would say, that is imposed by the submissions that were going on. And we were also responsible for a different sort of event, which was like this mesh of Ignite that totally went bad, but that's for another time. So I've actually pulled up here on my phone, I'm gonna list it over here as well, the PowerPoint for what we were covering, so you can kind of see. This is myself and Josh Pritchard, my mentor at the time. And the reason I was interested in data collection and apps in the first place is just the efficient use of time. Like, we are spending so much time doing things that we could ideally have some sort of other process, automated thing, a computer doing for us, that would just give us more time for the actual clinical work and the good work that we're doing. So we started with that. We looked at the history of data collection and behavior analysis. Shout out if anybody knows what these weird little bead counters are, if you ever used one as well. We then went into looking at all the different ways in which people collect data. There was a whole lot of different folks that we talked to listed here, as well as looked into their sort of research. We then pulled an example of what I used to use that was kind of allowed me to be in the heart of precision teaching, but wouldn't allow it to necessarily get in the way of having to collect data very, very frequently. So I took a probe of a rate for each of the IEP goals for each of the students I was working with, and I'd use it on this sort of sheet that you can see here. We went through and we talked about the issues of having it in a paper form, what this kind of looks like. Looked at Kong and Iwata's 1998 article. They had one of the pinnacle articles and what we were kind of, in a way, trying to emulate in Java. And some of these you'll see are still around, some of them probably aren't. You can see how old the iPhone was when we were doing that back in 2013. We went through, looked at each of these and like what the limitations, the strengths, the features were. There was a ton of them. And we walked these out. We went through every single one. And we created something very similar to Kong and Iwata, looking at what were the strengths, weaknesses, what sort of data would they collect, how easy was that. Started actually collecting actual samples of this. I'm gonna include that. That was a poster where you could see how quick it was to be able to enter and start analyzing these sort of data. But the interesting thing was, it was an area that I was super interested in and super familiar with, I'd say as well. Like I was practicing, actively using all these sort of apps, trying them out. But when I got up on stage, like everything became extremely difficult. And I've never struggled with anxiety. That is not me to say that I'm struggling with any sort of mental health. But I distinctly remember getting up there, starting to speak, and it felt like this overwhelming sensation throughout my body, just like all the blood rushed all of a sudden. And then I could feel my throat kind of getting a little bit tighter and like very, very hoarse. Like all I wanted to do is just cough. And it's something that goes up and down in my career. Right now it's a down. It's very easy to go up and speak to people. It definitely gets easier over time, but I'm pretty sure I nailed down what it was after dozens of presentations. And that was when people in the room are there that I'm very, very into their work. I just respect them a lot. That is what causes me that sort of pressure. I put that on myself. And so having the top folks in education and ABAI and that whole network of people that I really respect and value, that was, I think, the setting event, the perfect storm that led to this sort of self-talk and evaluation going on. Interestingly, I already knew about acceptance and commitment therapy. I was doing some like things that were of that nature day to day to be able to just understand what my values were, what I was going towards. But I think the key thing here was not having enough practice opportunities to put those sort of things into action in the moment. There's something about that true, like practicing in the moment rather than talking yourself through and kind of practicing outside that context, that is just so true and so valuable. So I've altered up my style a little bit, how I approach these sort of things. I always have a sort of like routine now before I go up stage, which includes like a little bit of stretching, a little bit of my own time thinking and listening to music. And the goal there is just like reminding myself, like, you do know these sort of things, you're good at it, it's going to be fun. That's the whole point of this, right? As well as trying to practice my projection, my enunciation, because I can be very poor at that. And if I can, just spending like the last 5 minutes just doing something random before I hop on there, watching a cool video, listening to a song, not talking to anybody, laughing with somebody backstage, anything like that. So the feedback was really interesting on this because nothing showed or indicated that that sort of thing was going on, which for me made really clear the fact that somebody can totally be having like a very difficult time in their own mind and their own experience, but we don't ever have a way to look at that truly from our own perspective. And this was the first time that I was really nervous, sweating, have a hard time speaking. And whether or not it was picked up by the audience was a very real thing for me that I've slowly worked on overcoming, but in no means am I ever over. And I start to, it reminds me of at the Hoosier ABA conference, I made a joke about nerves being nervous, what is it? Nerves mean you care. And that's something I kind of jokingly tell myself now, and it helps. But anyhow, yeah, the feedback did not correspond whatsoever. I've linked that down below. I've also linked all of the presentation materials that I could find as well on Dropbox, so you can go dig into those. It is widely outdated with what's on the market now, but it's a cool little thing to look into. I was a fan of the way we were looking at the chart that's on the poster, just looking at the time it took to really dive in and use these sort of things, because a lot of times people are saying that they are the best tool ever on their marketing, but not necessarily, and we still have yet to have a really good objective analysis of that. And there is an article by Pat Fryman on anxiety. I would believe that that's what I was experiencing, and what I get sometimes is by no means like a clinical definition or like a diagnosis of mine. It's in these very small, really now infrequent, once every year or 2 or 3 times where I'm speaking, where I start to get that sensation kind of going through my body, and I get that kind of like constrictiveness in my throat, sweating and all that sort of stuff. But for me, it's been identified as something that I've worked towards, and it's easy to overcome. But if anyone is interested in a behavioral perspective, that anxiety article is down below. Hope this was valuable. Let me know down below. This is a weird thing to kind of start up, so I'm trying to make sure it's valuable, honest, and not too rambly, which I feel like this one was. So if you have any pointers, I'm really interested in those. And next week's topic will be with Travis Blevins, talking about what it's like to have this project that you never really get off the ground, and that sort of like failure to launch. So that one's gonna be edited and posted, and then the following week I will also include a poll to figure out what it is that you guys are interested in. So let me know if there's anything that you have feedback-wise down below. This is again just for you all. I'm looking for you for support on how to make these better, okay? That's your behind-the-scenes Patreon failure series daily BA. Bye.